Good morning, friends and colleagues. Thank you for tuning in today as we discuss transport communications, specifically trends in the United States. My name is Angela Juhasz and I run the online training program here at ARB Group in the Melbourne office, and today I will be here to provide you with technical support. If you do need it, please feel free to drop me a line. Joining the webinar team today as moderator, we have Andrew Meyer, Manager of the MG Lay Library here at ARB Group's Melbourne office. And just some housekeeping items before we kick off with the presentation. So we are recording today's session, and a copy of the recording together with the presentation material will be made available to you once the session has concluded. Now, webinars work best when they're interactive, and so please don't be shy. Get involved. Type through your questions into the questions and comments box right there. So that's the left one there on your screen, and you'll find that within your control panel. Please do so at any stage of the presentation, as we'd like to make it a very interactive discussion as we go. Now, before I hand over to Andrew to give us some background and moderate the session, I would like to very warmly welcome our special guest presenter who is joining us via correspondence from the United States. Please join me in welcoming Lloyd Braun of AASHTO. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that stands for the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. Lloyd is the Director of Communications at AASHTO, where he manages a group of communication professionals building awareness for national transportation issues with strong emphasis in social media and strategic media outreach. He and his team are responsible for all facets of agency communications, including strategic messaging, crisis communication, organisational branding, and a website administration. So lovely to have you on board the webinar today, Lloyd. A warm welcome to you, and as I said, I'll hand over to Andrew, and then we look forward to hearing more about your presentation. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Angela. Today's webinar has been organised by the National Interest Services NIS program, which ARB Group Library coordinates with the financial support of the road-related federal, state and territory government agencies. I believe we have a number of participants today from NIS funding bodies and their affiliated agencies. NIS disseminates land transport information in the national interest, assisting in the sharing of resources and expertise and informing transport operation decision making. More information on resources available through NIS is available on the ARB Group website, and many of them are freely accessible, like this webinar. As Angela instructed, please post your questions at any time in the question box, and I will oversee their delivery to Lloyd. This may be soon after you post them, or it may suit the flow of the webinar to raise them at the end. Over to you, Lloyd, please.
Alrighty, well, thanks for that, Andrew, and I'm just handing control over to Lloyd. So Lloyd, if you could share your screen with us, we'd love to see what you have to show.
All right, well, that should be it. Just to give me a nod if you can see my screen here.
We can see it just fine. Thank you so much.
All right, fantastic. Well, it is a pleasure and an honor to be asked to share with you a little bit of information about some of the things that are going on here in the United States related to social media, and specifically social media for transportation agencies. And so I'm going to step through a few items of research, and then I'm going to talk about a recent survey, an annual survey that we do of state departments of transportation, and I'll wrap up with some examples of how departments of transportation here in the United States are using social media. Just for clarification, so everybody understands the terminology, here in the United States we have 50 states. AASHTO members are all 50 U.S. state departments of transportation, as well as the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. And state departments of transportation are usually those state-level organizations that liaison with the federal government and manage transportation systems within those state areas. So, communicating transportation, government, social media media trends in the United States, and you can see there's my contact information, and we're going to talk about the 6th Annual State DOT Social Media Survey. Let me begin by just suggesting that the idea of social media, this idea that we have information and we need to share it, and its linkage with transportation, at least in the United States, goes back several hundred years, and probably even before that if we roll it back to its basic form, which is the movement of information along a route, along a pathway, and delivery to a person who is interested in receiving it. So in our case here in the United States, colonial post roads were actually some of the first methods for transporting information throughout the colonies here in the United States, and this idea of social media is just in many ways an extension of that. And so when we keep it in that context, one of the things we can keep in mind is that there's the discussion of information, and then there's the discussion of the transmittal or the tools or the pathway for which that information is communicated. So the big trends in the United States, really from about the mid-90s on through to current day, there's been three major things that have driven social media acceptance and adoption. One of those has been the internet, and then broadband adoption, which is that big fat pipe that pushes data in and out of our many devices and carries information, and then the mobility, the idea of being able to receive and send information from wherever we are. Those are the three big trends. Here's some information, and these next couple of charts, if you'd like to dig further into them, you can find information at the Pew Internet and American Life Project, or pewinternet.org. That's where I get this information, so I want to make sure I source that appropriately. But you could see here from about 1995, which is the mid-1990s, the number of people who don't use the internet, or the percentage of Americans who don't use the internet, was somewhere around 88, 89% here in the United States. Meanwhile, those who use the internet, it was well below 20%. And as you move forward, you can see that the internet adoption just continues to move forward, and then somewhere around 2001 there's this 50-50 moment that happens as more people begin to use the internet than don't, and then it goes on from there. I would say that right about here in 1998, with the introduction of the broadband connections into American homes, that you really began to see an acceleration over the next 4 or 5 years of internet adoption. And today there's actually research into, well, why is it that we still have about 10 or 12% of Americans who don't use the internet at all? What is their story? And that actually is an interesting story all to its own. We don't have time for it today, but nonetheless, that the conversation certainly has changed. Device ownership. This is an interesting tracking chart, and let me just back up here and just share with you that this top blue line, as you see going across this chart, is the cell phone. And the cell phone, if you go back to about 2000, the year 2000, about just over 50% of Americans had cell phones. American adults, that is, had cell phones. And today it's somewhere up well over 90% of American adults. And then right below it here, somewhere, I'm sorry, let me move over here, somewhere around 2010 or 2011, Pew Internet American Life began tracking smartphones, and you can see this huge rapid adoption there. We also see on this chart that there's MP3 players. They don't track those anymore. And then these down here, tablet computers and tablet computers and e-book readers. This huge adoption from about 2010 all the way to 2014 has just been amazing to look. But again, all of these areas here are mobility, this idea of being able to have devices that can send and receive information from wherever a person is. You're not tied to a desk or to literally tied to a wall. So that introduces social media. You have these mobile devices, and so what are people doing with these mobile devices? There's only so many folks that you may want to talk to on the phone during the day, and so what ends up happening is that people are using the apps and the different items on their devices. And here's social media by age group over time from about 2005 all the way through to current day. And very quickly you can see this all internet users that just about 75% of, this is the average of all internet users, are using social media. Social networking online. No surprise that this top green line is 18 to 29-year-olds. Those are the young ones, and that really is no surprise that young people are driving this. I like to show this chart really because if you look down here at this yellow line right here, ages 65 plus, and that's when you really begin to see it, when you have just about 50% of those people over the age of 65. Now imagine people over the age of 65, they were born somewhere around World War II, and just the advent of technology that they've seen. This is the generation that argued, why would I ever need a computer on my desk or have one in my home? And now about 50% of them are actually using social media. That's a tremendous acceptance. A few more charts. I'm going to move quickly through these. Internet users in 2014, and we just think of these as people who are young, but this is specifically internet users who are using the internet via their mobile devices. And so the idea of mobility, look down here at this item down here circled in red. It cuts even across household income. So 77% of those here in the United States who make less than $30,000 a year for a household, not an individual, a household, are still accessing the internet through a mobile device. That is a tremendous percentage, and probably well worth considering as we're trying to communicate with a transportation using community. Social on a global scale, and this is literally throughout the world. When you look at who the big monster is here, Facebook, 1.39 billion active monthly users, YouTube right behind with over 1 billion monthly active users, Twitter, and then you fall down to MySpace, which still has about 50 million active users. And for those teens, if you want to know what the young people are using, while we want to argue that it's probably Vine and Tumblr and Snapchat, in reality, the research as of about a year ago, Facebook continues to lead the way. And we'll talk more about Facebook here in a little bit. But look at Instagram. About 52% of those teens 13 to 17 who are using social media, they're on Instagram and they're on Snapchat. So they're definitely using these tools, and we need to be aware of that as well. So what's all this mean for reaching the community? So we talk about the adoption of the technology and the devices. So what does that mean for us in terms of reaching people? I like this photo. This is from the late 1940s. And if you look here, these people are definitely in two different spaces. It's what the researcher Adriana de Souza y Silva coined the term hybrid spaces. It really is her way of describing people being in one place and in another place at the same time. And we like to think of, I could have just as easily shown a photo here in the United States of people standing in line at the grocery store, and instead of newspapers they would have a mobile device in their hand and they would be looking at that. But instead I use this photo because in the 1940s these people are on their way to work or they're on their way home, and they're actually in two different places or multiple places because of the information they're consuming. So we're a people that live in hybrid places and spaces, and that is part of what is this whole social experience is all about at this point. Okay, finally, what does that mean in terms of media consumption? And this leads us into the survey that I'll get to in just a moment. I love this example from Ottawa, Canada, where the newspaper there did research with focus groups, and what they found is that indeed each individual device had an individual and a unique user experience. And so rather than publishing one newspaper per day that was reformatted into multiple devices, they actually decided they would produce 4 different editions per day: the print edition, a computer edition, a tablet edition, and a mobile edition. And that was specifically customized to reach the individual people who use those devices because they were using them in different ways. And for us in transportation, then, that means that if the public is using all these devices and they're using social media, the expectation is that government will be in that place as well. And not only will it be in that place, it'll be savvy enough to do it in a professional way and in a way that is worthy of or consistent with the corporate experience that they're expecting from all the apps and other items on their devices. So we've been tracking this for state departments of transportation now. This is the 6th year. We do this every June, and this year 40 states out of our 52 members responded to the survey. And what we found is that indeed 3 major tools are the tactics of choice for departments of transportation: Twitter, Facebook, and we lump in the services YouTube and Vimeo into a single video services because some departments of transportation, because of their firewalls and different security protocols, are not able to use YouTube, but they do use Vimeo, so we put those together. We also found that Instagram and Vine are gaining in terms of usage by departments of transportation, and 10% of the respondents in this year's survey are going to be trying Periscope or Meerkat, which are streaming media services in the coming year ahead. Here's a survey that looks at from going back to 2010 when we did our first survey, and you can see that Facebook in 2010 was really used by just over 40% of the survey respondents, while Twitter has enjoyed success right from the start, over 80%. And video has been relatively consistent all the way across. And here's the rest. Now, I'm not going to take you through this whole messy chart, but its usefulness is really in the representation of the rise and fall of all the other things that have come up and disappeared just in the last 6 years that DOTs have used or have expressed interest in using, and some of them were popular, some of them were very popular, but you look at something like here's Flickr in this dark burnt red, and you can see this growth for Flickr, which is a photo sharing service, and it's starting to fall off. It's below 50% now. Mobile apps came up and enjoyed some success in 2014, well over 50%. Now it's down around 50%. So the staying power of all of the other items has fluctuated, but the big 3 are the ones that we're going to be paying attention to for the rest of this presentation. One of the questions we added to this year's survey, we had never asked it before, but we asked the departments of transportation to tell us if you only had one social media survey, which would you use? And what we heard loud and clear was that Twitter was overwhelmingly the tool of choice. And Facebook came in second, no surprise there, and video was a distant third. And the reasons really are fairly self-explanatory for Twitter. It's always enjoyed support broadly with departments of transportation here in the United States. It helps rapidly disseminate short messages such as traffic alerts. Another person responded in the survey in the follow-up comments. It's their largest audience. And in the United States at least, and perhaps in Australia as well, the media really follows Twitter, and they're able to customize their Twitter feeds to be able to follow people who are specific experts or associations or departments of transportation that are specific to a topic or an area, and so it allows DOTs to really connect with their reporters as well. Meanwhile, Facebook, the supporters there told us that it is still the largest overall audience, so that's why they feel like they need to be there. Even with the strange ways in which Facebook adjusts the newsfeed algorithms, they feel like if they even buy a little bit of an ad or are active in that space, that they're growing an audience. And people also expressed interest, the departments of transportation expressed that they appreciated the suite of tools that allow them to tie together all of the other various social strategies that they have available to them to build a bigger brand representation in the Facebook space. And so one of the things we asked of the DOTs, and we asked this about all the tools we track, is how are they using these tools? But this is specifically for the big 3. I broke this little chart out. And you can see here that when you look at Twitter, emergency notifications, traffic alerts, and construction and maintenance are the big items here. So again, these are items that they're short messages, they're urgent messages, there's immediacy to it, and while yes, there may be some messaging that goes along with public involvement or general branding, this other category tends to be safety or education focused. Primarily for Twitter, it's these short little messages. Meanwhile, Facebook, emergency notifications are really, and traffic alerts are really not that important. They don't drive as much as, look here, public involvement. Over 74% said that they use their Facebook for public involvement, for branding, and this construction maintenance really is about, hey, coming up this weekend, be prepared for lane closures. And again, this other is safety, education kinds of messages. Video, no surprise, emergency notifications, nobody's putting that out on YouTube or Vimeo, but they are using for general branding, public involvement, and education types of initiatives. Yes.
Looking at how states are using the big three at the moment, do you track that over time? Do you have any information on whether they're using it more now for construction and maintenance sample?
Yes, we do, and I didn't pull that chart out, but it would be very easy for us to go back and look at that information. And I think what you'll find in looking at that is that Facebook initially was not used at all for emergency notifications or traffic alerts, but more states have been putting information there than they were early on. Part of that is because the audience, again, is so large in that space. Meanwhile, early on with Twitter, and early on being just simply 5 years ago, a lot of states were simply using automated feeds that would come out of our traffic management offices that were just short little automated sentences. And then today, in today's world, it's much more of a conversation and a two-way engagement with the audience. So that's why you see, I think, more a growth here in public involvement and branding than you would have seen maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But the strengths of the two have remained consistent. Twitter being its more emergent information delivery, and Facebook kind of the broader ability to establish a bigger branding visual.
Okay.
So I'm moving on to some specific examples, but before I do, it's important to note that through the surveys over the last several years, we've identified 5 things that are really challenges that remain for state departments of transportation, and not challenges that would keep them from using social media, but just sort of some moments that continue to make this a struggle and signal that this is still an emerging way of communicating. Here are those 5. The internal information flows and message approvals, just the bureaucracy of getting information approved for release can be a challenge. Staffing and resources. You imagine that in a place like a government organization here in the United States, your job is fairly stable and secure, so people stay a long time. We have staffing issues where we're needing to retrain and ask people to take on new challenges and learn new skills, or bring in new folks onto our teams so that they can be able to deliver information with these new tools. In conservative organizations like transportation agencies, again here in the United States, very conservative organizations, they're dealing with infrastructure that is built to last 75 years or more. There is this inherent bias against social media or those rapid adoption of new technologies or trends, and so we're working against that. Keeping up with public expectations. When these new tools come out and brands, major brands are doing all of these fancy things and how they connect with the public, a Department of Transportation, again, we're dealing with staffing and internal information flow, so it's often difficult for DOTs to even keep up with public expectations for how they want to use, how the public wants the DOT to use these tools. And finally, measurement. with the huge adoption of social media, and you saw the spaghetti table, I call it, of all of the lines of all the tools that have been tried and have grown and sort of shrunk back over the last years, you can see that there's been a tremendous investment in time and resources, and being able to measure that and be accountable for that shift in resources has been very important. And I would say this area has been a huge black hole and an area where we need to be doing a lot more work as an industry in terms of helping DOTs learn how to measure their social media more effectively. Okay, any questions before going to some examples here?
Yes, I've got a question again, Lloyd. Do we know much about the actual social media workforce in the transportation sector? How many they might be employing in the DOTs, or what background those people might have? Do you ask any questions around that line?
We do. We initially began asking whether the Departments of Transportation had any staff at all dedicated to social media. And initially, in the first couple of years, only a couple of states had anybody dedicated to it. And what we're finding out now, and I'm sorry I didn't pull that chart out, so I can't give you the specific numbers, but it's all available on our website, and I'll show you the link here in a minute, is that most states have at least one person dedicated full-time to doing social media activities of some kind. And in many states, what they're finding is that the social media responsibilities are being dispersed throughout a team of people. So while a Department of Transportation in one state may have a very centralized communication model where most of the news and information comes out of one place, another Department of Transportation may have a dispersed information organization where information is dispersed throughout, say, a series of district or region offices, and that's where you're seeing a multiplying effect or a broadening out and distribution of social media responsibilities.
Okay, thank you.
Well, let me take you through a couple of examples here. I have a handful of them, and I'll just take you through some of them. I've tried to pull some that just give a representation. Let's start with the newest kids on the block, the streaming media services Meerkat, which is this one here, and Periscope, which is owned by Twitter. And they really just turn your smartphone's camera into a streaming media device. And here's an example. So here you see that the Pima Sheriff Department in Arizona, near Tucson, Arizona, they're simply using their video streaming service to give a behind-the-scenes look at a training exercise. That's all very interesting. Some departments of transportation told me, the Alaska DOT, for instance, told me that they used Periscope to broadcast an entire hour-long public meeting recently. You may have seen this one. This is a young lady who decided she was going to drive home drunk and asked people to comment, and then she was summarily arrested after she hit a couple of cars. Very unfortunate way of doing it, but so that's not how state DOTs use this, but it certainly gives you a sense for how the public is using this. My goodness, not the smartest young lady in the bunch here. Microblogging. So microblogging, like Snapchat and Vine, this is a rapidly evolving area. I tried hard to find an example of Snapchat, but the nature of Snapchat is that you're sending in a message or creating a story that disappears over time. So being able to preserve it and have it for you to see is very, very difficult. It's still, for my son, is one of his favorite. He's 16, and he and his friends use Snapchat all the time. They love it because it's harder for me to track what's going on in his world. But it's a difficult area for brands. They're just starting to make some inroads there, and DOTs I think are struggling with this as well. But Vine, which is an Instagram as well, they're able to do short 15 or less than 20-second looped videos are being used in some creative ways. Here's one from the Maryland Department of Transportation.
Lloyd, sorry, I'm not getting audio on that one, so I'm not sure if the audience is either. But I wonder, can we make these videos available to our audience with perhaps some links once the webinar's concluded, in case people want to go check that out in their own time?
Yes, we can, and I have a slide right here that has all of those links.
Wow.
And you will. So I was thinking ahead for you on that one, and I'm going to take you through some more examples here. Let me show you how Caltrans, one of the things about Twitter is that it's folks have found that with a sense of humor that they can get a lot of interaction with. This was on May 4th, and for all of you Star Wars fans, May the 4th be with you, as a reference to Star Wars and Star Wars Day, and also Bike Month. So Caltrans, California Department of Transportation, used this one, and they got over 50 retweets on this. Here's another one that they did, and they copied New York magazine, and it was a fashion show showing different ways in which people were using safety gear. So a good sense of humor on that one. And so let me do this here. I'm going to take you through. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Here's another example. There we go. Here's another example of how the Kansas Department of Transportation is using Vine. This was a safety fair that they did with some young people, and so they were able to just do a bunch of loops here. This is the series that I wanted. All of this, there it is. This is a series that the Illinois Department of Transportation has done, and this is an example of how all of the pieces have been tied together. I just blogged about this today. This is an awesome campaign that they've done, specifically targeting young men who tend to disregard rules like driving the speed limit or wearing their seatbelts. And so they used an actor named Michael Rooker, this gentleman here, who was in the Walking Dead television series, and had him star in so far 4 different webisodes. I'm not going to play these. You can watch them on your own. But these webisodes, all 4 of them now have received over 3 million views just in the last year. And it really has been a successful campaign. And then they tie together their Facebook and their Twitter and also an Instagram feed as well. Here's that Maryland Department of Transportation again, just some examples of how they use Instagram. This is their director reading to school kids, and just another way of kind of getting in front of folks. I'm going to click through these fairly quickly here. Washington State Department of Transportation, when I worked there 5 or 6 years ago, we really invested heavily in Flickr, and transportation is such a visual environment, and so you can see that they have over 2,200 followers, but even more, there's almost 23,000 photos just since 2007, and it's a rich repository of information and gives you a real sense for the dynamics of transportation. It's very, very fascinating. Here's another example of from Washington State DOT of blogging, and again, giving the public another view of transportation from a different perspective. This is going in and doing some environmental work with the Department of Natural Resources in the state of Washington. So that's been very, very popular as we go through. And you can see here in the comments, what an uplifting story. And somebody else said, this is so cute. Pinterest, this is something that the Tennessee Department of Transportation has invested in heavily, and you can see here how they've curated information, and some of it's historical, other for their centennial down in this area, and you can see again they're leveraging the visual aspect of transportation and what that does for people who follow their information. This is the Louisiana Department of Transportation. This gives you an example of how they've leveraged their branding and their logo right up front, but just a variety of ways in which they're telling stories in the Facebook environment, embedding videos, connecting with Instagram, helping people understand things like roundabouts, which here in the United States are still relatively novel in some parts of the country. So that's our Facebook. And finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't show also LinkedIn, little old LinkedIn, which at one point was almost not used at all by DOTs and now is being used more and more. And this is the way in which the Mississippi Department of Transportation is using LinkedIn, and it's in much the same way as it's using, believe it or not, Facebook. So it's cross-posting across the two mediums and environments. So I'm going to come back over here and go back into my Prezi presentation and just ask if there are any additional questions before we wrap up.
Yes, I have a couple of questions, Lloyd. One, you showed some history-related material. Do you have any idea at what percentage that is of what DOTs are doing with social media? Is that quite a small percentage that some of them look into their archives and share that, or are some doing that quite a lot?
Actually, content is really an important aspect of all of this. So what you see is that they're all desperate for information to share. One of the great opportunities for information to share is history, and so I'll just show you. This is AASHTO's Facebook feed, and we also cross-post this on Twitter as well, and you can see that we do a Today in Transportation History just about every day. It's tremendously popular. It's one of the places where we get most of our retweets, and you see this, several of the departments of transportation around the country do similar sorts of things, and specific to their state DOT. So yes, content and historical content is very popular, and we try to look for things like, what you'll find is we'll post something on, say, a historic bicycle race from back in the 1910s, and that'll get picked up by bike organizations and will get reused and moved along through their channels as well. So it's a nice way of connecting the variety of modes as well.
While we're on retweets, is anyone monitoring the type of retweets and where they go from DOTs? Is it, as you said, picked up by other connected organisations, or is there a lot of retweeting by media of things that they've seen on DOTs? Do you have a picture of that at all?
Only anecdotally, and again, I think this is where some states, and I would point to states like Mississippi Department of Transportation, is very savvy in how it tracks and monitors how people are moving about the information that it provides. It's very good at measuring, and so I can wholeheartedly endorse them for that. They know exactly not just the retweets, but how deep and broad their audience is. I would say that that most level of measurement for most DOTs is much more simple than that, and they'll track. We had 10 retweets on that post, or we have 7,500 people following us on Facebook, and that's kind of the level at which folks are tracking at this point. So it's not a very sophisticated measurement as an industry, as a standard at this point, but I do know that the interest is growing and pressure is growing to develop some types of protocols and some standards to be able to understand this better.
And you're only 6 years into this survey, so obviously it's still developing, and there are many things to work out what's important to track and what will help DOTs better understand social media. I'll ask for any questions from the audience at this point. If you'd like to put them into the chat box, you're quite welcome to do so, and we'll pass those on to Lloyd. But while we're waiting for that, and while we've got a pause, I will ask Lloyd one more question, which is, do you have any picture of the workforce in social media in terms of in transportation in terms of whether they're interacting with one another?
Absolutely. We maintain a password-protected site through a service called yammer.com, and that gives all of our communication people from departments of transportation around the country a place to check in that is behind a protected password and ask these kinds of difficult questions and share best practices and hey, what's going on over here, and how did you see that going? But beyond that, just the day-to-day interaction of following each other and retweeting information. I wish I had pulled up for you. It would take me a moment to pull it up, but here in the United States we have the Super Bowl every year in January, and now it's moved into the early part of February, and our Department of Transportation in Washington State challenged the Department of Transportation in Massachusetts, where the New England Patriots play, and we're kidding each other about the Super Bowl and had a very lively exchange. So there is a lot of networking that goes on through the social space among DOTs, and just following. If somebody does a really funny, smart thing, we share that, or just a successful campaign, we share that, and that's how people learn from each other. So it's been very successful that way. There just does seem to be a fraternity of social media folks throughout the DOTs that do share information with each other.
Okay, thanks. So, Lloyd, have you got any further slides to show us, and then we'll move to a close?
No, this is my final slide here, just to summarize.
Okay.
As you say, we are in our 6th annual survey, and so we're still evolving, and I do think that measurement is one, and also archiving information and making sure that we're archiving information appropriately is something that, as we look ahead, we also think that mobile is going to continue to be the driving force among the people who are using our information. We don't think that that's a trend that will go down. It's something that we're going to be faced with for a long time. And I'll just add one final thought, and I touched on it early on when still we have here in the United States about 10 or 12% of adult Americans who are not using the internet at all, that there's this idea that as new technologies are introduced into a society, that the old technologies never go away completely. And so as communicators, especially government communicators who are expected to be able to communicate fluently with all populations and all demographics, we have to remember that as we move forward into these new places and new spaces with these newer tools, that there are those who are still going to be using some of the older tools. So we have to continue to be very good at media relations. We have to continue to be very good at using mail and choosing the right tool to be able to target the right population and understand who those populations are. And that's never going to go away, and that's something that here in the United States among departments of transportation we talk about all the time. Did you get that?
Yes, we got part of that. I lost a little bit of it, but I'm not sure whether that happened to others. I do have a question from the audience about how useful have these platforms been in sourcing information, both direct information requested from users and analytics on social media use. So I'm not sure how much of that you can answer, but I presume you'll have a little bit of information on how that's happening.
I'm sorry, were you asking that of me, and can you ask that again?
Yes, so how useful have the different social media platforms been in actually sourcing information for, I presume, for the DOTs to conduct their own business? Have they been able to source information from users? You know, so we did see people posting a video of "I'm about to drink drive," which is sourcing information.
Yes.
So how's that happening? And also, how have they been collecting analytics on social media use, which you did touch on slightly, but you may wish to expand on?
Yeah, very good question. And I will say that a colleague of mine back in Washington State, Jeremy Bertrand, was more of on the front lines of this, but back in 2006, 2007, when Twitter in particular was first coming up as a new emerging tool, maybe it was 2008, I'm it's all running together for me. But nonetheless, as Twitter in particular began to develop as an emerging tool of choice, we found that people kept sending us photos from crash scenes. And so we finally had to get to the point where we said, stop sending us photos from the crash scene, and, you know, keep both hands on the wheel. And because this idea of distracted driving began to be much more of a concern for us. And so I think you still see DOTs receiving information from the public about things that are going on in the real world, but we ask that you know, it's part of a conversation back and forth. People may say, hey, you know, there's a big pothole at this one location, or a sign is down at another location. Departments of Transportation at all levels, local, state, or well, actually local, regional, and state here in the United States, are having to learn how to deal with that information, receive it from the public, and process it so that these things are addressed, because once we're notified, we're expected to do something about it. In the District of Columbia here in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, several years ago, they started a annual campaign called Pothole Palooza, where they literally asked people to go out and take photos of potholes and tweet them in and send them in, text them in to the Department of Transportation to help the city's DOT know exactly where the potholes are that they need to go out and fix. And the commitment is, once you've notified them of a pothole with the photo, that they go out and replace it within, you know, a certain number of hours or days.
Okay, thank you, Lloyd. We have one further question from the audience too, saying it's a really great webinar, so thank you for that, with a concentration mostly on DOT communications to the community at large. But have social media been assisting DOTs with their policy and priorities? Have they been able to draw anything out of their social media use that allows them to make decisions and form policy for the future?
Well, I guess I could answer that by saying that social media today is not a unique tool, and so therefore any type of engagement with the public that has to do with long-range planning or visioning, or working on a project that is trying to establish an idea of what a new interchange might look like, or what a new community trail might look like, is going to be using and leveraging some kind of social media. So it is being employed at all types of communication, all levels, and so from that perspective, yes, it is being leveraged and used for that. I would say that the nature of departments of transportation in and of themselves is to push information out. And the engineers are, and transportation agencies know their systems and know where the work is going, and so there's this constant flow of information out from the departments of transportation. It's very difficult to get a DOT by nature, or an engineer in departments of transportation, to pause and listen back. And that's one of the things that I think social media helps us do, I think, more effectively.
Okay, thank you, Lloyd. On the screen at the moment, you see Lloyd's contact information, which he's kindly shared with you, and you see a link to his blog. I recommend his blog. He put some very interesting posts on there, and it is actually part of the reason that we invited Lloyd to participate, is that some of us here are avid users of his blog, and thought that he would be an interesting invitee for an NIS webinar. So I will close from my end at moderating, thanking you for joining today. This NIS webinar, courtesy of Lloyd from ASHTO, who has kindly given his time in the early evening in DC to do this for us. As we've said, it is being recorded, and that recording will become available, and that includes the presentation with those links to weren't able to note them down at the. So thank you very much, Lloyd. I greatly appreciate your. It's been very, very interesting. I'll hand back to Angela to finalise the webinar and close. And so thank you very much, Lloyd.
Absolutely, thank you.
And thank you, Andrew, for moderating this webinar and making my life a little bit easier today. Thanks again for all of your work in preparing today's content. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the whole audience when I say it was really enjoyable and really nice to cover something outside what we'd normally cover in our webinars, so I enjoyed the diversity. And now, ladies and gentlemen, once this webinar has shut down, you will get a pop-up survey on your screen, and it's comprised of just a couple of short questions. So if you could kindly fill that in for us and let me know how we travelled today, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much again, and hope you can join us again in future.